TNA has a new TV deal, JD, and they have replaced the WWE on Sportsnet 360 in Canada.
Good for them.
It's the number one sports station in Canada. It is actually a better sports station than TSN, so I'm told. I don't know shit about Canada, but everybody's saying like this is actually going to be like they have as far as like ability to gain viewers, like they're gonna be on the biggest network of all wrestling companies in the country of Canada. So they actually have a better TV outlet than AEW does. And then of course WWE is going to be on Netflix. So they're on Netflix everywhere. So that would include Canada. So they're actually going to have like they're on a bigger station than TSN, and TSN is what holds AEW. And then AEW is on at like weird times on TSN, and sometimes it's on the app. So their deal in Canada is not very good. So TNA actually has a better TV deal in Canada than AEW. I get the feeling that AEW is getting paid a lot more money for their deal on TSN than TNA would be on Sportsnet 360. But I think this is a good day for TNA. They're a Canadian-owned company. They have now left the Fight Network, and starting on January 2nd, they could see TNA Impact, Explosion, Impact in 60, and a bunch of classic programming all over. That was reported by John Pollock today. So that's a big deal for TNA, man.
Yeah, good for them. Like, I'm gonna be super curious to see what that translates to into viewers, because like when you look at Canadian ratings for stuff, the raw number is just significantly lower than it is in the US. I don't think people in the US realize just how dramatically smaller the population base of Canada is. Square mileage wise, it's big, but I mean,
it's 10% of the US population. So if we have 300 million, they got 30 million. So that's kind of how it was explained to me. So I don't know what the population is right now, but it's like 10% of the US population. So yeah.
I'm super curious to see what those numbers will translate into, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm really happy for them. I'm curious to see what that means, because we've talked about before about TNA becoming like a largely Canadian based company at times, especially when Scott was running things, but it seemed to go another way. I mean, it's, I don't want to say its roots are in Canada, but it's like present is certainly Canada. I almost said Canada. Canada.
Well, their parent company operates out of Toronto. And so, but their home base, essentially where they do all the productions in Nashville. So they're, Toronto based and Nashville based. So they got a mix of a lot of Canadian and American employees, but their entire leadership chain, Gail Kim all the way up, is all Canadian. So like Anthony Chon and all the different people that work for that company, they're all Canadian. Lynn Asper's out of Winnipeg, I believe. So, but I think that this is actually a better TV deal than what they have in the United States. I think they'll probably get probably end up having more viewership than in Canada than they do in the US, because of just how it's not just how small Access TV is, because Access TV is probably available in more homes, but because it's the number one sports station in Canada, they just have more people watching it, right? So even if it's not as available, it doesn't reach as many people. There's just more people per capita that are actually watching that channel than Access TV.
I'm super curious to see what those numbers turn out to be.
Yeah,
I really am. I want to revisit this. When does it start?
January 2nd. So honestly, I wish they would have started later in January when they do their first live episode. I think it's I think it's 27th is when they do their first live episode of Impact since like over 10 years. So I would be curious to see what it looks like, though.
You got to give Impact TNA a lot of credit, because I remember going to Impact tapings at Skyway Studios in Nashville back in 2021, right? And just seeing kind of where things were for them at the time in that tiny little studio. It was tiny, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're going to go back to live TV and how much they've really grown, right? It's just the amazing thing about wrestling is like things people just assume, like this is just in general, people just assume that things just expand constantly, right? And don't understand the idea of businesses that they're up and they're down and they boom and they bust, and they companies that exist for a long time have waves, right? Like sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're in the middle, and it's fun to see TNA kind of on an upswing right now, like for TNA, like, and it's been cool. It's been cool to watch, and I like that they've got this.
Yeah, it's kind of been a slow build, because I think in 2023 they started to They were still in some of the similar venues where they started to get lots of sellouts in 2023,
Mhm.
pushing capacity in a lot of the buildings. And then in 2024, they started to go into bigger buildings, and like next thing you know, they're doing 2,000-3,000 people in certain venues. And then in 2025, they're like in April they're going to where the USC Trojans play basketball. That like you can get like upwards of 3,000-4,000 people in there. And then they're doing the UBS Arena where the New York Islanders play hockey in New York. And they already sold like almost 2,000 tickets like within a couple of days. Which like we're talking impact, we're talking TNA, right? So I'm not trying to compare them to AEW and to WWE because those two companies have a significantly larger budget. So what TNA is doing is purely like grassroots type of marketing. They don't really have the money to go spend on a local marketing campaign. They're just getting their wrestlers out in front of people, getting them in the local media. Like Kazarian and Nick Nemeth were at USC Trojans basketball game, and they got they did a tour with all of them, like a press tour with the Trojans and stuff like that. So that's how they're getting out there and selling tickets, is just by getting out there and working. They don't have the power of their television show to be able to sell tickets for them.
No, they're hustling, man. Their street team game is really good. They've gotten really good at selling tickets. We
Yeah.
bashed them back in the day, back when Base for Impact was our main show. And in that time, they busted their ass to sell seats in just about every town they visit. And you have to show respect for what NA management has been really able to do to sell tickets the last few years. As far the one concern I have in 2025 is them retaining talent. They're going to lose Jordan Grace. They're going to lose probably Gresham. They're going to lose Joe Hendry at some point. Do you think it's a good idea? Now, here's the problem: is that WWE started their ID program,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is going to force AEW to start really picking up a lot more of the other indie guys that aren't getting tagged. If you're TNA, I think you should be using these WWE ID guys.
I think so too, because I think for a long time I didn't want them to embrace the idea of being a feeder league, but I think them being the feeder league is kind of what helped gain some of the momentum that they got in 2024 when they did embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
When they did send their talent over to WWE and like got them in front of bigger eyeballs. And then what did WWE send? Feeder type of talent, like talent that never wins any matches, that are not getting pushed, just there in TNA to get reps. And that turned out to be like really good for both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if you're WWE and you sign these WWE these ID people, I think that you would want them to go to TNA to get the repetitions, like kind of sending them on excursion, like go to TNA for a
Mm-hmm.
year and then we'll bring you up to NXT. And then because they're not, and if you're TNA, I think you might as well be okay with that, because what are they getting right now? They don't have the resources to compete with WWE or AEW when they want a piece of talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not going to outbid AEW for Speedball, for instance, or they're not going to outbid WWE for Jordan Grace. So who are they getting? They're getting the runoff from both companies at this point, and they have to be able to do that effectively.
Anyone decent by the end of next year is going to be signed to something. You're either going to have a Ring of Honor deal, a WWE ID deal. You're going to be with New Japan Strong. Like everyone is going to be tagged something. So if you're TNA, you want to. I think we've talked about this before about TNA being like Memphis, right? And a good place for talent to stop over or young talent to develop, right? I think more now they can really be Memphis in the early 90s. Right when WWF was using them and having like Tatanka and Owen Hart and like Coco Beware, and guys just go down to Memphis to help Memphis out and help Lawler and Jarrett. And I think that's a good spot for them right now, because they can really help be the place where, like, because I'm pretty sure NXT is going to be performance center guys. And they've made it like pretty obvious that the PC is going to be for your NIL athletes and the ID is going to be for your indie workers.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really smart of them, because the indie guys aren't getting better at the PC. They're just getting hurt.
Yes.
Right. And I think the PC is going to be a place where you just kind of breed out the guys who don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. And then in hopes, like when those people leave, you hope, if you're WWE, it's like, look, we just think you're not ready right now. You need to go out to the indies and hustle and get ready, and then maybe we'll bring you back. And just not everybody loves pro wrestling enough to go and do that.
Well, that's kind of what AEW's done too. It's very much the Japanese model of we believe in you, we've invested in you. Now it's on you to get better.
Yeah.
right? And you see that with guys, like some guys go get good, and some guys, are shooter umino who don't. Like it kind of comes down to you and how good you want to be. And I'm sorry, it's the deck is stacked. So if you're an NIL guy, you're going to get more opportunities, right? But if you're an ID guy, you want to do this anyway. So you're going to keep taking your bookings, but you've got like, it's like you got drafted, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly what it is.
Like baseball specific. It's like baseball draft more so than like a football draft.
Yeah. Yeah. Because baseball draft, they send you through like their single A, double A, triple A farm system essentially.
Right.
And well, TNA will have their core group of men and women. Yeah, they'll have the core group of men and women who are really good wrestlers, right? They'll have like a good 10 to 15, and then everybody else is just people kind of coming in and out.
So you got to look at it to continue the baseball analogy, right? A lot of good prospects, they go to double A, right? They spend their time in double A, and then oftentimes they'll skip triple A and go right to the majors, right? Your triple A is where a lot of times your utility guys come from, right? So I think that if NXT is double A, TNA can be triple A.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because triple A is where like if you're say you're the major league team and you get somebody down with an injury, well, you're going to bring somebody up from AAA, somebody that's ready to go. Right. And when somebody does get injured and they need to rehab themselves, you send them to AAA to rehab for a while. Sometimes you send them down to single A or double A, depending on how much time they need. But when I lived in the Bay Area, the Giants would send people to the Sacramento River Cats. And so when you go to their games, you'd occasionally get to see some of the big league players in those games while they're trying to get back to the big leagues, right? So that's kind of what it is. And we're not saying that to diminish anything that TNA is. No. I think that's like a good place for them to be. You bring those people in and like they can ultimately put over your talent, right? Especially like your core group, because you got you guys like Moose and Eddie Edwards, like they're not going anywhere. Like Eddie Edwards is so happy here. Like he can, like, did you see him slap the shit out of a fan the other night?
No, I missed it.
So at Final Resolution last week, Eddie, who like wrestles with a t-shirt now, he's still really good in the ring, but you can tell brother likes his bread, right?
It's Tommy Dreamer. He's the new Tommy Dreamer. We've said that before.
Essentially, he's kind of patted himself after Tommy Dreamer, and he's in the front row. He slaps a water bottle out of a guy's hand. The guy then slaps Eddie right across the face. Very light slap, but a slap nonetheless. And Eddie just slaps the piss out of the guy and then shoves him to the ground. That guy ends up getting arrested. I'm like, Eddie, you kind of started that shit when you slapped the bottle out of his hand. But we're on the side of Eddie because we like Eddie. He's just like comfortable.
Very Japanese. It's something you get away with in Japan. Like, hey,
and then like the Hardy Boys, they just signed a new deal. Like they're very comfortable in TNA. Moose is a guy that's been here for like 10 years. He's not going anywhere. He loves it in TNA. He gets paid really well, and he seems to be doing great in TNA.
The wrestling ecosystem needs TNA.
Yeah.
Which is why it's survived, right? TNA has survived for over 20 years now because it's necessary.
Yeah.
It's necessary. You need TNA. Like I don't want to say it's like the lifeblood of pro wrestling, but I think it's in a lot of ways, it's kind of like the liver of professional wrestling. Like you need it. You don't think about it a lot, but if it's poison, you're going to die. And pro wrestling is not a good place if TNA is not healthy. Right.
So case in point, one of the moments that got over the most at the Hammerstein Ring of Honor Final Battle was Jay Lethal coming out as Black Machismo, and then Jeff Jarrett coming out with the guitar to help him in his match, right? Like TNA has kind of got its tentacles all over the American wrestling landscape.
Whether you want to admit it or not.
Yes. So one last point I want to make, and then we'll go ahead and call it a night. I do think that TNA's new TV deal in Canada on Sportsnet 360 does send a signal to television companies in the U.S. that they're not married to staying on Access, because the whole reason TNA exists right now, that it was bought out of bankruptcy, was for Anthem to have their top-rated show on the Fight Network, and it's been the top-rated show on the Fight Network ever since. And then they bought Access TV to put TNA on it. And now it's been the top-rated network on Access TV. Well, earlier this year, they moved Invicta, which they purchased to put on Access. They moved Invicta over to CBS Sports Network. I don't know what the ratings are like. I don't think they're tracked by Nielsen, but that's a much larger, much more viewed station than Access is. I would assume it's got college basketball, college football, all that stuff. I think this does open up the possibility that Matt Hardy has been talking about for a while, that TNA might be moving off of Access. What that would look like, I don't know. Like I said, there's no demand for more television, for more wrestling on television. And I'm not saying they're going to get to USA. I'm not saying anything like that. But could they move over to a station kind of like CBS Sports Network? I don't think that's a crazy thing to think. I think that would actually be a real possibility. Paramount Network? No. USA? No. Like Sci-Fi? Probably not. Fox Sports 1? Probably not. But something like a CBS Sportsnet, which is not a huge network, I could see them upgrading to that station.
I'm bullish on this one. Mainly because there's such saturation in the marketplace as far as pro wrestling goes.
Agreed.
And like when WWE leaves, typically, now we saw in Canada, we saw that this was the opposite, but typically when WWE leaves a network, they're not replacing with pro wrestling.
Yeah.
We heard rumors earlier this year of AEW taking over on Fox. Those seem to have petered out. Like if there were early discussions of that, it didn't really go anywhere. And maybe if AEW was stronger on TNN or TNN, Jesus Christ, my brain is in 2000s tonight. TNT or TBS actually.
That's the 90s country station. Sorry.
Yeah, it is actually TNN. Wow. The Nashville network. Jesus. I think that you would see more action toward that, but that seems to have fizzled. Maybe it'll come back at some point, but I mean, well, right now Fox is killing with sports, so I don't know. Maybe in the springtime, something. I don't know. I don't foresee it right now.
Yeah.
So let's see how the marketplace feels about pro wrestling.
There is no demand for pro wrestling on television. The ratings are dictating that. AEW is way down. TNA is TNA. WWE, as we saw, adding Saturday Night's Main Event did not work, right? But with them moving off of USA, and no, I'm not saying USA is going to pick up TNA. That's not what I'm saying. But there's less. And Rampage just died. They just taped the very last episode of Rampage. It's never coming back. So, which tells me that there really isn't a demand for more wrestling on television with Rampage going away. And it looks like maybe this Fox deal would have has fizzled out. So I don't know, man. I think 2025 with TNA is going to be super interesting. They're taking some big swings. I do want to shout out Myron Kidd here because he had the comment earlier that that the number 2 company selling 25,000 tickets in a baseball stadium was not very good. But he's very confident that TNA will pull out a great attendance number for the UBS Arena show. Brother, UBS Arena is a 20,000 seat venue, and they set it up for 4,000. So there you go. That's so TNA set it up for 4,300, and I think they'll sell that out. But we're saying the same thing, right? Come on.
Yeah, let's be consistent.
Yeah, and that is really good for freaking TNA.
Yeah, it is. 4,000 people in an arena, a real arena for TNA. That's good, but a lot of it's going to be tarped off, realistically speaking. And you got to kind of own that because this is what wrestling companies do. They rent arenas and they base it. Okay, I think we could sell this many tickets conservatively, and if they sell more, well, then they open it up a little bit. If they don't, then they contract it a little bit. It's believe me, I went to Dynamite a couple weeks ago, and it was. I've been to a lot of the Dynamites at the Wintrust, and sometimes they're packed, and recently it gets a little bit smaller, and a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. There's less seats on the floor. It kind of is what it is with wrestling. Yeah. And it's cyclical. I always worry about the cycle going down because I've seen it so many times in my life, but TNA is doing well right now. If you told me 3 years ago they'd be selling 4,000 tickets to anywhere, I'd have called you crazy. But here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have been like, what? Are you just rounding up homeless people and putting them in the bleachers? Like that's what I would have thought you were talking about. But
it's an Eric Bischoff trick, actually.
Yeah. That's what they did at Center Stage. All right, guys, that is going to do it for us this time on the Mike and JD show. Everybody have a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
If any news breaks during the week, I'll probably just hop back on. JD, as you already know, is super busy. Brace for Impact will be back live on Saturday morning, so you guys can interact with me and chat with me on there. But again, if any news breaks during the week, I will just do a quick episode for everybody. But please have a very Merry Christmas. Take care of your families. Love each other this holiday season. I would greatly appreciate it. Everybody be as nice as humanly possible. And if I say anything stupid on Twitter, please feel free to just laugh because it's all jokes.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody. All right, everybody. Mahalo.
Competition starting to get thick. It's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. Ain't made no rain from the track.